share this. Okay. Um, 3 things today. First of all, any questions about the quiz? Yes. Oh, no, you can go anywhere online. It's I think I worded it internet sources and the textbook. So yeah, you can go beyond the library. And if there's any confusion, I apologize. For that particular time, I really wanted to show you how to use the library, but yeah, you'll be kind of stuck as you found out. Yes, of course. No more. Okay, well, the second thing I want to do is talk to you a little bit more about Byzantine art and start the chapter 10 on Islamic art. And the third thing I want to do is kind of get you guys starting to think about the group presentations. And so, start with this mosaic in Daphne, Greece, Church of the Dormition. And we've been talking iconography, basically what I showed you, asked you about in the quiz. So who would this be? Like the subject of your quiz, Mary? I'm kind of giving you guys some answers here too. And as you can see, she's dressed in blue. And that is part of the iconography of the Virgin. And this young man is St. John the Apostle. Did we talk about this yet? I thought we stopped right before this. Okay, good. I thought this is where we were at. And so anyway, he's a young man and he's a saint. He's an apostle. Again, doesn't have quite as an elaborate halo. This is all iconography, if you will. We don't see the angels up here as it's been damaged. What's that skull doing down there? The College of Christian Knowledge, which is really kind of what they wanted to produce through all of this artwork. And I want to tell you something else too. It was important to do these kind of standardized images. It was important for them to balance the line between idolatry and graven images and actually showing or illustrating the tenets of the faith to a population that was in a large part illiterate. And so this kind of functions in the same way that Egyptian art functioned. Tells a story, it does it through pictures, so you don't have to decode the letters, the words of the language. And so anyway, I asked about this skull. This is really deep in the weeds, but Jesus was crucified and buried in a place called Calvary. It's a hill in Jerusalem. And it was also known as Golgotha. And Golgotha is probably something like a slang term, but it was known as Golgotha, which is the place of skulls. And part of that's probably because they crucified a lot of people on this hill. So Golgotha is really where this part of this comes from. And so this is like how iconography works. And you see, this is Kiev, Ukraine. We see here, I'm going to zoom in on this. So who would this be? Blue halo, but no crucifix. So you got to a point where you could actually start. This is actually the Virgin, I believe, because it has all of the iconography, but it could into be Saint Sophia. And here's the iconography for the Virgin. Here is the iconography for Christ, as we were talking about, almost always with a scroll or a Bible, and often giving the sign of peace. And so anyway, what you got here is this storytelling through pictures. And so Saint Sophia looks a lot like the Virgin, but that's deliberate. St. Mark's in Venice, and it too is decorated with all of these pictures, which are in fact icons. I'll zoom in on some of this. And so it tells a story. And there's the Virgin dressed in blue, and Empress Irene from Constantinople. And so here's what we got as this idea of the blue adorning the Virgin, as you guys are researching. That also becomes something that's kind of transferable. And for a woman to be a saint, she'll always be compared to the Virgin, the ideal. And in a lot of places, and in actually a number of religions, Mary is venerated that way as the ideal. And so anyway, you see that. Of course, this would actually tell you who she is, if you could read that. But archangel, angels get halos. And so I want to kind of give this away. I'll give it away tomorrow too. I was looking at the question I asked you for the quiz. And I asked you to talk about the iconography. And I want you want you to think about this. How do you know this is an angel? Of course, you can read it over here, but what else would tell you this is an angel? And some of the other trappings, if you will point to Archangel Michael. And there's a number of Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, so on. What would tell you that this is an angel? Yes, the wings, absolutely, part of the iconography. And if you think about it, we don't really see so much in other cultures human beings with wings. They are on occasion in Greek sculpture, they have Nike, they have a winged Nike actually, but that's kind of a rarity. We see a lot of animal human hybrids, but in terms of the angels, this is almost all it. We take it for granted, but again, it's something that was invented. It was something to promote the iconography, to distinguish this person. If you could read all of this stuff here, the wings means an angel, the holiness, probably that it's person's an archangel, but almost all the angels get a halo because you know that they're above. Another who's it? Jesus, absolutely. And you can tell. Of course, what we're getting to now with the iconography is that they're actually moving even farther away from that naturalism, and they're portraying Jesus according to his theological size or his theological importance, how important he is to the religion. We saw that in antiquity. We would see a pharaoh be very much bigger. The standard of Ur, for example, we would know who the king was because he would be like at least about a head taller than the other figures. And so we start bringing these things back, and they come from antiquity. And again, it's a move away from all of this classical and Hellenistic realism that we see dominate painting and sculpture for about 500 years or longer. Anyway, but yeah, Jesus, and we know this. Here's another thing too. We talked about this the other day. He is on a throne. This always becomes an issue because Christ, you look at some of the problems of Christianity and vis-a-vis art and depicting Christ. We talked about this the other day, the idea of a beard or wisdom or age. And so what we have here is this throne makes Christ the king every time you have emperors that are Christian and promoting the Christian religion. When you have popes that are likely to become saints, you almost have to elevate Christ up above them. So the idea of enthroning Jesus kind of follows what we saw with the Madonna enthroned. And we could say that, as Christ himself said, my kingdom is not of this world, but he's sitting in a kingly chair. But it is the throne of wisdom. But we see the blessing, we see the book, we see the beard, the halo with the cross, and so on. And see, this is like 12th century, so it stays. It persists for a long, long time. Again, this is a little different, but let's zoom in on it. Jesus, the blessing, the book. And as we were saying the other day, oftentimes he's in a purple robe. It's just a little more blue. The beard, the halo with the cross. Talking about your quiz question, this is kind of the same thing. And so, iconography, that's how it works. It's language, it's visual language. And, oh, now I'm going to show you a little bit more here, too. I'm going to zoom in. And so anyway, they have on the side here other holy figures, and they have to develop their own iconography, but oftentimes the iconography is not quite as well known or as standardized as, say, the Christ figure. So oftentimes you'll see a written description, the name of this person, and that's all through here. And so as we have more saints over time, so we have same thing. Same thing goes on with sculpture. And this is an ivory panel. It's actually kind of small, very delicate carving. Again, the names of these people, we don't really need that for this figure. We know who he is, the sign of peace, the book, the halo with the cross, the beard, and again, enthroned. And so anyway, this is really kind of, in some ways, a little bit of a throwback in that this actually appears to be a little bit more naturalistic than most of the artwork we get from the time. So the carving is exquisite, lots of just beautiful, delicate carving. Lamentation. So I already told you about this crucifixion. This is when Christ is being entombed after he's off the cross and they're ready to bury him. They are truly sorrowful. We know who these guys are. They got wings. They're angels. They got halos. So yeah, they're not like flying demons or anything. We know that they're the good guys. John, young guy, no beard. Mary, blue, halo, Christ. And so anyway, I showed you some of the architecture on Monday, and for a lot of it, this persists, this idea of brickwork, terracotta, tiles, dome, archways, etc. And see, this is 13th century. So in this part of the world, they stick quite closely to tradition. And I want to go back here to this. This is 1054. This is roughly the same time we're talking about. We had what we call the Great Schism. And so here they practice Christianity basically in the same way that Constantine had set this up. It is Eastern Orthodox. Some call it Greek Orthodox, but part of that has everything to do with when Constantine consolidated Christianity, he brought a lot of scholars from Greece, a lot of Christian scholars from Greece. And why? Because at the time, Greece was like the intellectual capital of the Western world. Even though Rome had the power, the arts, the knowledge, the scholarship was still centered in Greece. And so anyway, brought them there, and I'll show you what that, this is kind of a, I pass it up. There it is. This is Constantine. And this is the Council of Nicaea. Nicaea. If you're a Catholic, this word will pop out at you. Niceno Constantinople Latin Creed. Constantinopolitan. Long words, can't do it. This is what I was talking about, how Constantine consolidated and standardized the Christian religion. I showed you about how he sent his mother, Saint Helena, to the Holy Land and identify all of the holy sites of Christianity and brought back as many artifacts and relics as you possibly could. And so this is what this is about. This is Nicene Council. Bottom line, if you're a Catholic, if you're not a Catholic, let me tell you why this pops out. When Catholics celebrate Mass, which is their standard ritual, it's a daily ritual. Part of that Mass is a recital, a group prayer reciting the Nicene Creed. And it basically, what this document is it says, if you want to be a Christian, here are all of the things that you need to believe. And it starts out, we believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And then it's actually a pretty long prayer, but when you standardize religion, you got to find out, you got to lay down some basic fundamental beliefs, the tenets, if you will, of the belief system. And so that's really what this is. And this held up for about 700 years. And the Eastern Orthodox went this way, and Catholicism, which set up the Vatican, and it traces its lineage all the way back to St. Peter. This is where they have established the Vatican, the Pope, and this breaks off from the other Christians. So we got Eastern Orthodox Christianity and we have Catholicism. I do want to show you, bring this to your attention. And that is this green. I don't know if you can read this, but this is Islam. By 1054, Islam becomes the predominant faith of much of North Africa, most of the Middle East, and various places in what is present-day Russia. And it's spreading all through modern day Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, etc. And so this is the major religions that actually drive most of the artistic. So the other thing I want to talk about here too is what we call manuscript illustration. And at the time, back in 5 or 1500 years ago or more, or actually since antiquity, the only way you had books is if somebody sat down and wrote the book by hand, transcribed all of the letters, and made a book. Sometimes in ancient times it would be a scroll. We see later, and this is in the Christian, we see it in the form of a book that we would recognize today. But there was a Bible, you had a Bible, it was handwritten. There were no printing presses at the time. It was truly a manuscript, which basically, take the word part and look at its origins, it means written by hand. Like manual labor, working with your hands, script. What a script is. So, in order to actually aid what you would call the text, oftentimes they would draw or paint a picture of what was being described into words. And so this is early 6th century, and this stuff is like from all over the place. And this is all from the National Bibliothèque, which is basically the National Library. And so, yeah, and biblio, that's another root word, exactly, it means book. And so this is how much of the artwork existed back in the time too. It's early 6th century. And they typically use the same kind of iconography that we see in the churches. And that's basically all we've seen here is churches, interior, the exterior, we're talking about the architecture, and we talk about the books, works on paper. And again, they still use a lot of the same devices. We still see the same formula for the angels, Christ, Virgin Mary. This is the ascension of Christ. He's after 40 days, after he was resurrected from the dead, Resurrection Day, Easter, and finally after what we believe was 40 days, there's some disparities. The bottom line, he ascended in heaven. That's part of the Nicene Creed too. And the crucifixion and resurrection. How many of you guys, this is kind of an aside here, but how many of you have heard of this place in St. Louis called the Dismas House? Dismas. they made a movie about this 60 years ago, something I grew up with. And what happened was there was a Catholic priest who realized long before social workers and all of these other kinds of things, realized that people coming out of prison were very likely to end up back in prison. Now we got governmental agencies, we got social workers, we got halfway houses, we got probation, we got all kinds of things that try to get people back into society. I might add, still not enough, but bottom line was this Catholic priest who taught at St. Louis University High. And he founded Dismas House. And it was a resource for all of these young men, mostly all young men back in the day. And it was like a way to reintroduce them to society. It would give them a place to stay because people get out of jail, they don't have any money, where are they going to go? A family may not want them back. Place for them to stay, get job training, put them, quite literally put them back on their feet. It was called a Dismas House. Why am I reminded of this here? Because at the crucifixion, Christ was crucified with two other guys. And while they're on the cross, one of them sort of mocks Jesus. Hey, why don't you get yourself off the cross? You think you're God, yada, yada, yada. And the other one says, he's the one that really shouldn't be here. He didn't do anything wrong. And Christ says to that guy, we are about to die and I will see you in heaven. More or less, paraphrase. That was Dismas. And the guy who founded Dismas House always insisted that was the only person that we know that went to heaven, because Christ told him on the cross, I will see you shortly in heaven. Anyway, made a movie about it. It's called The Hoodlum Priest, black and white. You can find it on YouTube. It's actually kind of cool to see what St. Louis looked like in 1959, but it's still here. And so anyway, we start to see other kinds of things. This actually looks much more naturalistic and moving away. But this is from, this is David composing the Psalms. And again, where we started. And so, after time, see, this is like, it's very important to watch the dates on this, because what we get here in 1310, 1320, 1400s, 14th century, we start to see the emergence of naturalism. And this is what you would call very late Byzantine, or you would call this early Renaissance. And so you see here, these figures are not flat like we've seen, still have some of the symbology, some of the iconography, but this is put into a much more believable space. And so it doesn't, the Byzantine Empire and Byzantine art persist. I have something else here too. There it is. And it persists to this day. And you can go online. This is a screenshot. Icon painting. Bottom line, this guy still produces Byzantine art. Why? Well, not everybody modernized, especially in the East, in Eastern/Greek Orthodox faith. They still practice Christianity in a way that it was practiced 1,000 years ago, before the Great Schism. And so it's kind of interesting to see people still using this iconography that you're writing about, that I've been talking about. It's the dominant art for many centuries, and it's well established. We know all of this stuff that we talk about with angels have wings, Christ has a halo with a cross, etc. Mary wears blue. Standardized. So he can still do this. And so they still make it. It's still the same. And I want to add one last thought on that. In this Western society, in this day and age, much emphasis in art is placed on newness and originality. And in fact, the newness is really kind of the underpinning of modern art. Modern synonym for new. Newness, creativity, individuality. And doing something like this is really not as, at least in the West, not quite as prized or esteemed, because we're always looking, at least in the West, for new modes of expression. Originality is key. But in other cultures, say this one, and actually in a lot of other cultures that are much more traditional, originality is not so esteemed, if you will. The art is in the correctness and the fidelity to the tradition. And so what do I mean by that? If we were in China and we were studying art, you were studying calligraphy, you would be looking at ancient manuscripts, Chinese calligraphy, and you would be practicing, striving to do calligraphy as the old masters had practiced. They don't want anybody going off the reservation, if you will. They're not looking for originality. They're looking for fidelity and adherence to tradition. And that's what this guy does, by the way. And in fact, he knows about all the iconography, the questions I'm asking you about it, boom, off the top of his head. So anyway, that is basically what I wanted to talk to you about Byzantine art, because when we get there, Bless you. And so let's take a look at this. Let's open it up. Bigger slideshow from the beginning. Oh, can't do that. Need to get this. I got to double check. There's the share. There we are. The Islamic world. Before I even begin with this, I want to give you a little bit of background here. We talked about the Great Schism, Eastern Orthodox Catholicism. But what we find, as I showed you on the map, by 1054, much of this whole area that used to be the Byzantine Empire has been converted. It's Islamic. And Islam, in essence, replaces Christianity. A lot of people don't really know this, but in a lot of ways, Islam and Christianity are actually compatible. It grows out of the same roots. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we always get taught like it's pretty similar. It's like the main difference is Christ's position within that's the word because the Quran.
Yeah, Quran. Yeah.
All the issues of prophet, these things is nothing more than like the regular prophet. All like he was a thing in that book, but just
That is a fundamental difference. Is that Jesus is a prophet, not so much the Messiah, the second Son of God relationship, and Muhammad is a prophet too. So, kind of what you're saying is absolutely true, but they would hold that prophets are really venerated too. They are really important. So saying that Jesus is a prophet, it's not really like to demean Jesus. It's still recognized. And part of this too is that we all three religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, trace their roots back to Abraham. And we call those the Abrahamic religions. All three faiths go back. And so anyway, it wasn't like that. Wasn't like they were giving up on Christianity. It was just another prophet. And so this is the Islamic world here around 1500. And see, as I was talking about in the other map, that was 1050. This is 1500. And you see all around the entire Black Sea, most of the southeastern Europe, what we would call the modern day Balkan countries, Islamic, all of North Africa, Saudi Arabia, through the Middle East, as I was saying earlier, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. And if this map went on farther, you would go down through Indonesia. A large part of the world is Islamic. And so there's a little caveat here. There's a little pink in here. former Muslim countries, and that is Sicily, Sardinia, Spain. And this was very contentious. This is something that was fought over for many centuries. And it is modern day Spain. We're going to talk about that too, because in some of these areas, the tension still exists between Islam and Christianity. It's an old thing, and it's what people have gone to war over for many centuries. And certainly Spain was a battleground for a long time. It was just got, anyway, I'll talk about that later. But you see, Islam, major religion. And this is 1500. So this is when we're talking about the Renaissance. Actually, the High Renaissance begins in 1500. By this time in 1500, Columbus has sailed to the Americas, and so on. And so anyway, this is the Islamic world, and it's a big part of the world. And so what we find here, this is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. And this is a holy site. It's not a mosque. It's kind of in some ways more like a monument. And what it is, the rock that's inside here it is, right there. And this is a place of religious significance to all three of the Abrahamic religions. And so, according to the belief systems, this may have been, it's believed by some to be the place where God created Adam. That goes all the way back to the creation of man. It goes back to Abraham, when Abraham was tested by God. God asked Abraham. Abraham had not had sons until he was very old, and then he had two sons. Isaac and Ishmael had two sons, and God said, I know you love your sons. You waited forever, but to prove that you love me, I want you to kill one of your sons. It'll show up a lot in Christian Renaissance art, and it's a big part of Islam. The difference being is that there's a disagreement on which one of the sons, or Ishmael, that Abraham was going to kill. But what happens is that God intervenes and said, you proved your love to me. Angel takes the knife out of Abraham's hand. And so if I get any of this wrong, and you guys know better, please tell me. But also, this celebrates Muhammad's night journey, where he flies on a winged horse from Mecca. And this is significant in Islamic belief too, not just as it relates to some of the more ancient text, but actually, anyway, I got something here. I want to show this. And I got to pause the video. And got to still make sure I'm on the Okay, well, that was kind of a good, I thought a pretty good overview. And like a lot of religious sites, there was the great temple built by Solomon on this spot, and it was destroyed, and King Herod built the second great temple on this site, and it was destroyed too. So this is like the third temple that was built on this site. So there is this kind of lineage here. I want to kind of go back, and this is essentially as it was 1300, 1400 years ago. The thing that's kind of changed with this is the dome itself, and it has weathered over time, and occasionally it's been rebuilt. This last rebuild was done actually in more recent times, about 50 years ago, where they replaced all of the tiles. There were lead tiles, and so you can imagine that was pretty heavy, lead shingles, if you will, and they replaced these with aluminum, and this is actual gold leaf, so it is really truly a golden dome. What I'd like to show you too is this. And you can see it's got some elements of Roman architecture. Obviously, the dome is something that was prominent in Roman times, and the octagon is something that is predominant both in early Islamic architecture and in Christian architecture. We saw that at San Vitale and some other places. But here, this is as best as I can zoom in. One of the aspects of Islamic art and architecture is that all of this iconography I've been talking to you guys about, that doesn't exist. And what you have is oftentimes calligraphy, where we have quotes from the Quran, and we also have patterning and geometric decoration. And in Islamic art, that becomes really quite sophisticated. They take geometry to new heights. It's like never been seen before. And this is all tile. And as you can see, this is held up quite well for being almost 1,500 years old. And so here's the interior. And as you see, it's the same ethic, if you will, not imagery, quotations, this swirling pattern. You can really, if you find out about, take a look at Islamic art, you'll find that the patterns, there's patterns within patterns within patterns. It's really, it's sophisticated, it's quite beautiful. You know, one of the things that happens in the Islamic world, I want to add, is that in this part of the world, they still thrive throughout the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th centuries. They they are thriving. And as I showed you, this Islamic world at 1500 Common Era, we would move that back sometime. You would see that Spain itself was an Islamic country, and Islam moved up through North Africa and the Moors, present day Morocco, Islamic religion, Moorish culture. They create and bring with them a whole treasure trove of knowledge and advancement that was not seen since Roman times. And so what I'm trying to say is this, that we don't see this dark period, the things that we call the Dark Ages, the times that we call the medieval era, whereas, how should I put this? How many of you have seen the movie Braveheart? No. 20 years ago, it was like real big. Anyway, it's a good depiction of what was going on in modern day Great Britain. It's the Scots fighting the English. What was happening in Europe was that a lot of the organization, sophistication, knowledge was all lost. It was hidden away in Europe, but it was thriving in the Muslim world. They still had advances in science, in mathematics, in poetry, in architecture, the arts, and so on. So, if you've ever heard of Lawrence of Arabia, was a British operative who worked in the Middle East during the First World War. He was quite surprised to find places in Arabia, Jordan, Syria, all over the Middle East, that the Islamic world was actually quite civilized and quite developed, as he said, while we Europeans were beating each other over the heads with clubs. So what we find after the fall of Rome is that there's a period where civilization goes downhill. It's kind of a Mad Max situation, if you will. Kind of chaotic, kind of tribal, kind of regressive. It didn't happen in this part of the world. Civilization continued to develop and flourish. And so anyway, let's see some of this patterning here. It's really pretty cool. And so even in the windows and the archways, again, a Roman thing. Holy words. And so, here's another view of it. And so that's the Dome of the Rock. It is one of the earliest examples of Islamic architecture. And unlike what we just looked at with Byzantine art, there are other things that we'll be looking at. Islamic, to be sure, but kind of different. We start to see objects and things. So anyway, I'm running out of time. I want to one last thing. one last thing I want to show you. And that is this. And so let me see if I got my share. Yeah, we can. And so anyway, we're going to talk about this on Monday. But I'm going to make it available to you now. And I'll show you how I do that. Available from, oh, it is available right now from from 10 minutes ago. And so can't cover up my buttons. Save. And so I want you to take a look at this, and we're going to do presentations. We'll talk about them on Monday, but what I'd like to do is do these as groups of 2. And so take a look at it, think about what subject matter you will want to present on. Pick a partner, pick a subject. And if you can't do that just yet, that's okay. We'll get to it on Monday. And so, any questions? Well, if there's no question, yes. We'll talk about it on Monday. And as you can see here, I'll show you, it's not due until November 28th. We're doing the presentations on the 29th and the 1st of December. 2 class days, that's what you'll be doing. And so have a good weekend. I'll see you. Looks like it's the sun's come out. Good time to end class. Good time to start your weekend unless you got classes. Right? Yeah, all right. Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you. How's the finger? There you are.
Well, it's broken, but
It was broken.
yeah,
Oh.
sorry about.
No, that's all right. I'm glad you told me about it. Yeah. No, we're good. That must hurt like a.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Really bad. Thank you.
Oh, see ya.